Welcome, friends, to the first Asking for a Friend YouTube of 2022. I'm here with my beloved friend, George Maringapasi, George James Maringapasi. And I have some questions that I have not prepared George for that I want to talk about because this YouTube channel, I'll just refresh anyone who is new to the channel, and George has no background on what we're doing here. He just trusts me. So I started last fall doing a monthly YouTube video for the CES, Canadian Evaluation Society chapter of Nova Scotia, and about addressing questions that I am often asked or that I've seen come up in rooms that are sometimes re-traumatizing or difficult when they're asked out front, and sometimes I'm asked them in a side conversation, and yet they're really important questions to get out there and to address properly. So I addressed a few of them monthly from September through to December, and I don't even actually know if I did a January. Maybe I didn't. Anyway, so we're putting this one out in February, and it's about, I want to talk about epistemological justice as opposed to epistemological violence. And I want to talk about arts-informed pedagogy as a mechanism of liberation, decolonization, and to reflect a little bit when we think back about some of the work we've done together, and that's just some of the conversations that we've had. And thinking about some of the conversations we had when you were doing your master's degree and when you were surrounded by people who thought that they were so liberal, and yet they were completely marginalizing your worldview and your concept of what knowledge is. So that's actually coming to the forefront now with a few different projects, and there's a lot of demand from various angles to ramp up our understanding of knowledge and consciousness, and to collectively, and then also distinctly in community, in a by us, for us sort of a sense, to revitalize knowing as a way of liberation, decolonization, and justice. And so there's a couple of different questions that are coming up. First of all, I would just love for you to just riff and share your experience as a knower and as a scholar and as a coach and a teacher and as an ally and as an advocate, because you go in so many different spaces, some of which in which you are first voice and some in which you are not, and yet you are bridging through your own experiences. So I want to talk about that. And then there's also a nuance of it's related to that, of how people who are not first voice in an experience and therefore are perhaps not personally impacted by injustices, marginalization, et cetera, how to develop the skill of being aware that you have unknown unknowns, and to avoid re-traumatizing by centering yourself and saying, well, that can't be true. That can't be the way it is. That's not how it is for me. So you probably don't need me to expound any more on that whole phenomenon.
Right.
So I would like to be quiet and just let you speak now.
Well, thanks. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I knew we were going to, gather today. I had no idea where it's going to go, but either way, I think it's a place of knowing, of learning. Intentionally holding space, and I think that's the key in all these places that we find ourselves in, right? When we're sort of bridging many places, we are, in Shona, we say that a prince is a regular person in another community or in another country, right? So being able to really embrace the fact that depending on where we are, we're called to do many different things. And as you're sort of introducing this evening, you mentioned the idea of needing to ramp up, or the way that we learn things, or ramp up our knowledge acquisition. And I think that that's where, instead of just ramping up and trying to gather as much knowledge as we can, I think for me, when I think of sort of getting this knowledge, I think it's the spirit of engagement, where we really are practicing being open. A lot of people, you ask them, they tell you, yeah, I'm open-minded, I'm willing to learn, and yet at the first hurdle, when something challenges their worldview or doesn't gel, naturally we become defensive, and there's almost a hesitation that holds us from going into the full-blown open-mindedness, which is what we really need to get past some of these nodules that we have that really sometimes prevent the true acquisition of or the true arrival at these places where we're truly hearing others, we're truly seeing others.
George, are you being generous by saying we? Like, is this equally true, or are there some people who are coming from a very normalized place of privilege who have a harder time with this and therefore more fragility?
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because I had an interesting exercise just this past, through my board work, this past November. And we're doing we had a session on allyship, because, allyship comes up a lot. And one of the things that we did was a petal exercise, where you have this flower with petals on it, and the petals representing different forms of privilege, where in many ways, unlike, if I'm talking to somebody and I tell them, I was born in Zimbabwe, I'm a Black male, I'm in all these things in North America, many people usually don't, they don't necessarily wrap their head around that I might have stations and places where I'm privileged, right? That I have a master's education training. I'm a therapist. In many circles, I can be a voice in my community. So I have some of that privilege as well. And one of the things that I took from that learning in terms of sort of allyship is that sometimes you recognize when we have privilege. So I say we because I too will find myself in stations where I'm privileged, and my voice I can leverage my voice. I can use that voice to uplift the voice of others, the voices of others who are, unable to uplift. And in doing so, then that's true allyship, right? And so, but I have to recognize that I have that. If I'm in my community setting, and I recognize that I'm a therapist, yes, but in my community, I recognize that I'm a Black therapist. I'm a Black male therapist, and when we need a voice, sometimes I recognize that I can speak to some of these things, not because I'm taking this automatic leadership role, but I recognize what that entails, and I'm leveraging my platform. Yeah, that's a great term. My platform to uplift the voice of those who would otherwise not be heard. So I don't think it's necessarily being generous, as it were, but it's a collective, and it's an ongoing collective approach. So that's why I say we in there. And indeed, the thing that I've found in my own circles is, I don't know exactly, perhaps you, in more discussions, might arrive at what it is exactly. But at the first sign of that incongruence, that the disagreement within us, even if we come in sort of the proper spirit of engagement and open-minded and ready to learn, as soon as we face that resistance, instead of sort of facing it head on, by just really taking the time to learn who we are, which areas we might have privilege, what that means. Historical contexts are important in all of this. To really go back and say, yeah, some of the systems and policies that we might have had might have perpetuated or might have discouraged, other areas or other places having a bigger voice. And we have to really identify that and be okay with it, right? And be okay with it, because when we take on, when we acknowledge that something is, doesn't necessarily mean that we take ownership for how it arrived there. But we definitely have a role to play in
So
making sure that we're moving forward.
Sorry, specifically, are you talking about injustices or states that are, for example, in Canada, you once described Canada as a lass wearing a fancy frock?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the ongoing legacy of genocide in Canada, of racism in Canada, when we're talking about the plan that Nova Scotia has, that is a sub-plan of the Canadian Decade for People of African Descent commitments. And the first recommendation is a formal apology and reparations for slavery in Canada. Yeah. That many of us would still have the, of my generation, would still have the inclination to say, wait a minute, no, sorry, you're talking about Canada here. You must be talking about our neighbor to the south.
That didn't happen here.
Because we're so good. And I think that one of the tragedies, one of the hopes that's coming out of the recovery of the bodies of children who were stolen and in the institutions of assimilation and that are being recovered, is that it's becoming unseeable. Our history of genocide, of racism, and the commitment to not seeing it is becoming revealed. So when you're saying that we need to own what is, accept new knowledge when it challenges our understanding of what is, and then you said, even though we didn't necessarily participate in how we got to where we are, that is somehow giving ourselves grace to handle our own fragility when we're confronted with these realities. So, so when we're talking about monitoring, evaluation, science, bodies of knowledge, knowing, and being open to pluralism in worldview, and not necessarily having to understand or even thinking that we have the right to understand or to know another person's worldview or sacred knowledge. And then to honor that and to listen for understanding, listen for expansion. Those are some experiences that I feel like you might have some perspectives on, because you didn't always have that experience in your education. And I think that there's something that academics and people who work with knowledge need to hear. And I'm really excited to see some of the Made in Africa evaluation and some Indigenous-led evaluation colleagues coming forward with worldviews that are desperately needed for the transformation of systems globally, and to repair some of the legacy of colonization and these myths of separateness. So is there anything you want to say about that?
I have a lot to say, but in the interest of time and just to be focused on here, I think we have so many talents and so many things that we could leverage on when we do evaluation and build programs that are responsive, and to really broaden the view in which we see people and programs occurring. If you're working in sort of government legacies, there's a way of doing things. There's things go on a certain way, and then you get on the ground. There's realities on the ground where you might need to yes, you're going to be, but you might need to go, a little bit to see, D, come back to C, and eventually get to B, and to normalize that as responsive. I think we need to really move to responsive, not only evaluation, but being very deliberate in building programs. But all of that, it starts with really just really owning and examining, having those conversations. And sometimes these things get bigger because we're talking governments, we're talking provincial governments, federal bodies, but who makes up governments and federal bodies? It's people, right? So we should be having those discussions in our boardrooms, in our team meetings. We should be having those conversations that might be uncomfortable, because I think that there isn't anything we can't talk about, and if we are not able to talk to each other, we miss out on really harvesting all the talent that all our diversity, our pluralism brings to the table, and there's a lot of it. And if we really are tapping into that, we even remove this myths that these things couldn't have happened here. We're people. These things happened here. They can happen anywhere, and if they can happen anywhere, they could have happened here as well. And so, it's hard sometimes to have this sweeping, sort of global changes and mandates. But I think we have a lot of success when we stay almost local. In our, of course, at first in our circles outside. But if we're talking about in the workplace, in our committees, in all these things, to really be committed to that spirit, the spirit of engagement, that is really about intentionality and just I don't know, without pontificating, but that really says, come as you are. Let's talk about anything. The systems might not move as fast as we do as people, so we can give them that lever, but we don't have to wait for systems to effect change.
I love that. So you're saying that there's agility and power in the relationships that we build with the people that are around us.
Yeah. I can't stress. I see that every day. I've seen that throughout my work, and when we are intentional about that, and we nurture those relationships, we begin to see each other, and we begin to become effective. Even I've gone to places where it's difficult places to be, but have enjoyed some really strong relationships and had some good work in spite of everything that was happening. And I would like to believe that's all relationship based. That's all going in with where it's like, okay, I don't know it all. I don't even know where we're going, but I trust that between you and I, we can adjust and readjust and arrive, at least begin to trend towards where we want to go together, right? And that's really, for me, is strengthened by strengthening the relationship, by growing relationships, because those we have some sort of direct influence on.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about your relationship with music and the significance of music. And I remember, and I'm going to try not to cry, but when you made a Mbira for my little boy, who's now a musician.
Yeah.
And that was part of you being an uncle to him.
Yeah.
That was part of you giving him power. And I won't even put any more words to what that meant to you. But I know that you're continuing to take on new instruments, and that that means a lot to you. You work through music and with music, and So do you want to say anything about that as a way of knowing and a way of a mechanism? Because I'm in the midst of some conversations about that with Afrocentric and Indigenous led knowledge processes, and drumming, embodiment of shared collective revitalization of culture, and is there anything, and if you want to throw in the relationship of sport to identity as well, or whatever you want to say about that embodiment of, yes.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, it's universal. It's that language that anybody can speak, even if you don't speak the local language. You can get to a place, listen to the music, and it taps into a part of our humanity that it just allows almost instant connection. And for me, Mbira does that for me. So Mbira is my traditional instrument. I've got quite a bit of a collection, and I do play them, but I'm not supposed to have that many. But yeah, so for me, the instrument is both a cultural identity piece, because I'm so far from home. But when I get my Mbira, I think it helps me to connect with the essence of who I am as a Zimbabwean. And when I play the Mbira, I feel I feel very grounded. I'm connected to my ancestors, to those that have gone before me in that aspect. And it also there's really a therapeutic piece to it as well, where the polyphonic sounds of the Mbira are very soothing. In fact, I would like to take my my vitals one day, get connected, and just play sort of a before and after. And I'm pretty sure I can observe something that something happening in there. But it's one of those. It's a vehicle for me to connect, and I have connected through that instrument with so many people. And it's something about it that the first line of engagement is like, oh, that's an interesting. I have one. Let me show you. You see, a lot of people are like, oh, this is an interesting piece, but that's sort of the initial icebreaker. You don't even have to say much after that. You talk about the music, but then as you begin to talk more, and especially for me, how the instrument is, and then you talked about your boy. That's how we related. We connected that way. And from that, I think we kind of branched out and solidified our relationship that way. Of course, he's a great musician. I follow him now, and I'm inspired by him, because now I'm playing. Well, I'm not playing. I'm learning reggae bass as something that I've always also liked to try. And when I listen to reggae, it has that sort of calming influence for me as well. And a lot of reggae music is great social commentary, and it really addresses a lot of the socio-political, geopolitical
I
stuff.
just remembered that when he was a baby, that was hands down his favorite music was reggae.
Yeah.
And most of my colleagues don't know. I don't know if any of my colleagues know this, but for the first I don't want to exaggerate, but let's say 6 to 9 months of Joe's life, he didn't sleep for more than like an hour and a half at a time. And anyway, we had a 24-hour schedule. And yeah, it's so funny because I just remember now that reggae was absolutely his go-to.
Yeah. It's so and of course, for me, the greatest teacher I ever had was sports, because in sports I learned to be disappointed. I learned to stay with the process. I learned to celebrate I learned to, to play for the long game. You might have a bad season, a bad couple of weeks, a bad training week, and you stay true to the process, never cut any corners, and next season you improve on your personal best and all of these things. So those little, and each week when you out there competing, you're meeting athletes you haven't seen before. You have no idea what they're capable of, and here you are. And even though you begin as competitors, many a time by the end of the season, by the end of the meet, usually it's a 2 or 3 day meet, you leave there as friends, and learning from each other. One person does something better than the other, and learning to say, hey, how have you arrived at this? Do you have any pointers? And this very natural collaborative, cooperative environment, even if it looks chaotic on the outside, it is amazing, because everything goes from by the time you get to the field of play, that's later stuff. Everything starts with training in the gym, in the off season, and all of these things building up to a season. You got to be in the right amount of shape, sort of peak at the right time, so that you're not peaking too fast, and for specific meets and all of these things. And it kind of reminds me of life in many ways.
I'm having so many ahas now of how I've seen you approach your work, and your way of connecting and lifting people up, and just through just being present and just being right there. Like, I'm thinking about some of the youth at risk, and that you would actually like get out on the field with them or go for a walk with them, and just really, and it's it's big.
You just gotta go away. And I've done therapy in a Superman suit, and it wasn't even Halloween, because I had a young client who really dug Superman. So I dressed up and we went there, and it was great. It was a great session, right? If I have clients that are struggling with skills in the community, let's go. Let's take the hour. Let's go and have a coffee. Let's walk in the street and all these things, because that's what they need. That's not what the design is, right? That's what the person needs. If the person needs to learn a skill, then let's do it.
So for those of us who are like doing evaluation, whether it's developmental or formative, and it's not just sort of like the autopsy type evaluation, like, okay, what happened, but we're actually in there trying to have influence. What I'm taking away is building relationship and understanding the importance of experiential knowing and learning, and also the importance of culture-specific, culturally meaningful revitalization.
Indeed.
Yeah.
The last one is going to be your most successful. If you're aware of that, it automatically allows you to disarm and really open your arms. When you say, you know what, I'm going into this area. So if you're doing, evaluation, program design, or whatever it is, if you task me and say, George, listen, there's a community there we're working on. The first thing that I would do you know what it is? I would go to the community and say, what do you need? That's what I would do. Even if it takes me 5 or 6 months, in those 5 or 6 months conversations, the real picture. Because I think when we are providing services, our goals are prudent. And those that we're providing services for, they have needs that are real. And those two
George,
need to be. Yeah.
I'm gonna dare to challenge you on one point.
Okay.
I feel like you might tell the power that be, the funder, that's what you're gonna do. But I feel like you show up and you don't say, what do you need? You say, what do you want?
Mhm.
Right?
True. Yes. Yes.
What
Yes.
do you want?
That's, yeah.
What's your
what do you want? Yeah.
desire
What do you want to
from
see?
an
Yeah.
asset, from a,
Yes. So the answer maybe that's a very subtle catch, but that's a good one, right? A good one. Often people, yeah, it's what do you want? What do you want to see?
yeah,
What is it that the community wants to see? So yeah, I appreciate that, but it's a
that's,
very subtle difference.
that's
But
one of the things I love about you.
but
So
yeah, it makes a difference. Yeah.
I'm making an exception this month because we usually try to keep this under 10 minutes. But I have enjoyed
Okay.
talking to you so much that I don't care how long this was because I think that every minute is just so valuable and worth it. And I appreciate that. And what I would like to leave you with is something that you'll recognize. I want to be like you when I grow up.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. I appreciate that, and especially coming from somebody that I have just deep respect for, and just really appreciate your friendship, um, your the spot that you occupy in this time and place, and to see your efforts. They're not just academic in your head, but they flow through your heart and through your hands, and you always give a good time. So determination, resilience, whatever it is, all the superlatives. So that means a lot coming from somebody that I respect so much. So thank you, Martha. And I really appreciate it. I didn't even realize we've been talking this long, because that's the nature of our conversations. But yeah, I really thank you so much for communing with me. It's pretty cool. And good
Okay, well,
luck with the.
I hope to bring our professional community much more of George James Maringapasi in the coming sessions, because I just really admire and appreciate how you bring knowing to life in ways that I think we need a lot more of. So I'm going to stop the recording, and thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you.